the mystery of the Shroud of Turin. This is going to be a super exciting video, guys. I can't wait for this one. New evidence has just come out that has verified the shroud to be exactly from the 1st century AD, just like we thought it was. So kick back and get ready to have your minds blown. Carefully preserved due to its extreme fragility, the ancient linen cloth remains hidden from view, protected from light, moisture, and environmental damage. And this season again, the lovely Vatican officials have confirmed once and once again that the Shroud of Turin will not be placed on public display. For centuries, the Shroud of Turin has stood at the center of one of the greatest debates in history.
And in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, which of course is attested to in the New Testament, we have this artifact, the Shroud of Turin, where you have the death, burial, and resurrection all found in one artifact from history. This is fantastic. And Enea Laboratories in Rome, Paul Dell'Ozzo spent 5 years of his scientific life studying how much light energy would be required to leave a flash, if you will, a 1st century selfie, if you will, of Jesus of Nazareth in the Shroud of Turin. And again, this isn't a pastor trying to prove anything. This is a light scientist. And Paul Dell'Ozzo states it took 34,000 trillion watts of energy, but It wasn't just the amount of energy, it was the speed. Think about when the Bible says we'll see Jesus in the twinkling of an eye. The Enea Laboratories said this 34,000 trillion watts of energy traveled in 1/40th of a billionth of a second to leave the image on the shroud. Otherwise, it would have scorched the image and destroyed it. And the image is just 2 or 3 microns thin. It disappears if you go closer than 8 feet to the shroud. And so this is what has baffled scientists. Scientists have confirmed it is not a work of art. It's not man-made. No one's worshiping some kind of man-made idol or relic here. They have confirmed there's no pigment, there's no dye, but they have also said we have no idea how this happened.
Now many, including me, believe it captures the exact moment of the resurrection nearly 2,000 years ago, a moment unlike any other event ever recorded in history. Though the shroud will not be seen by the public, scientific research and historical investigation have continued quietly behind the scenes. Supporters for the shroud argue that an increasing body of evidence points toward the shroud being a genuine supernatural artifact depicting Jesus Christ. On the cloth, a faint yet unmistakable image can be seen. A bearded man with long hair, his hands crossed over his body, and visible wounds consistent with Roman crucifixion. Scourge marks appear across the back and shoulders, and puncture wounds mark the head, consistent with a crown of thorns. To many observers, the image does not resemble traditional religious artwork, but instead appears more like a forensic imprint, one that some describe as a photograph formed without a camera. The Vatican has consistently maintained a cautious approach. It has never officially declared the image on the shroud to be Jesus Christ. However, in 1988, church authorities allowed a series of scientific tests to be conducted on small samples taken from the cloth. In 1988, radiocarbon dating indicated a 12th century origin. Yet almost immediately questions arose. So what you guys are looking at here on screen is a repair that was done, and you can tell by the different weave pattern. Sometime in the 12th century, I believe, the shroud was being kept in a monastery somewhere. You can look it up. I'm just pulling this info off the top of my head. But it was involved in a fire. They were able to salvage the shroud, but the corner and some of the edges, I believe, were damaged in the fire. So a monk or somebody patched it, and they added this piece of cloth onto the corner, and this was the exact corner piece that they allowed the scientists to cut off and take in radiocarbon date. So yeah, that's why the new evidence is actually proving this thing from the 1st century. So critics of the carbon dating argued that the samples may have been taken from a repaired section of the cloth and could have been contaminated by centuries of handling, smoke, or from fires, and just environmental exposure. These concerns opened the door for renewed investigation. Filmmaker David Rolfe, who has produced several documentaries examining the shroud, was granted rare access to film the original cloth. After decades of research, Rolfe says he is now fully convinced that this thing is authentic. He has absolutely no doubt that the individual depicted is Jesus of Nazareth. Supporters emphasize that carbon dating, while valuable, is not infallible. They point to cases where ancient artifacts have produced misleading data due to contamination or sampling errors. With advancements in scientific technology, they argue that the shroud deserves fresh analysis using modern methods unavailable in the 1980s. In the southern Italian city of Bari, research aimed at redating the shroud continues. A scientific team led by Professor Liberito De Caro analyzed threads from the cloth using X-ray crystallography, a technique that examines the natural aging and cellulose at the atomic level. The structural properties of the linen are consistent with fabrics produced during classical antiquity. Professor Liberato De Caro. Samples taken from the shroud dated back to approximately 2,000 years ago. Researchers studying the image note that it depicts a Jewish man who was crucified according to Roman methods. The wounds align with historical accounts: nails through the wrists, not the palms, trauma consistent with scourging, and a spear wound in the side. Supporters argue that these details were not commonly known in medieval times, further deepening the mystery. One of the most astonishing claims surrounding the shroud is that there appears to be no natural mechanism capable of producing the image. Scientists have confirmed there is no paint, no dye, and no pigment embedded in the fibers. So this image, which happens to be only visible in the photo negative, is only 2 to 3 microns deep on the very outermost layers of the fibers. According to researchers, the image becomes nearly invisible when viewed up close, yet resolves into remarkable detail from a distance. This unusual property has baffled scientists for decades. At Enea Laboratories in Rome, physicist Paolo Di Lorenzo spent 5 years studying the energy required to create such an image. Tens of thousands of trillions of watts. Any of a slower or less precise release of energy, he states, would have scorched or destroyed the cloth. Equally puzzling is the sequencing of the image and the bloodstains. Studies indicate that the blood was present on the cloth before the image formed, as no image existed beneath the blood. This suggests that whatever created the image occurred after the wounds had already bled, adding yet another layer of complexity to the puzzle. Today, the Shroud of Turin is considered one of the most intensely studied artifacts in human history. Physicists, chemists, engineers, forensic experts, and historians have all examined it. While they remain divided on its ultimate origin, many agree on one point: the image cannot currently be explained by any known artistic or natural process, and it has never been successfully duplicated. Public discussion of the shroud has expanded far beyond academia. Podcast host Joe Rogan and commentator Eddie Bravo have publicly shared their astonishment after exploring the research. They note that the shroud functions as a photographic negative on non-photographic linen, a phenomenon that was first discovered in 1898 when a photographer developed a negative image and saw a lifelike human figure appear with startling clarity.
He brought up the Shroud of Turin,
Yeah.
and I always thought that was fake. It was like in the 80s.
What is that,
And
Eddie?
the shroud, it's like the cloth that Jesus was buried in and left an image of him.
Uh-huh.
And in the 80s, like 1988, they did carbon dating on it. And they go, oh, it's fake. See that?
Yeah, it literally has
I
like
never-
the image of Jesus
Yeah,
burned into it somehow or another.
I never looked into it. I just figured it was fake. But listening to you and Mel Gibson
Yeah.
talk about it, I'm like,
It's
what?
real?
Is there
Well, apparently it's a lot older than they assumed when they did the first testing. And one of the problems is cross-contamination. There's also been repairs to it. But they did subsequent testing, and they found that it was like 2,000 plus years old.
Yeah, and the one thing,
It's in
it's
the range.
the most studied artifact ever. Like particle physicists, nuclear engineers. They all studied it, and some of them, some believe in it, some don't believe in it, but they all agree on one thing: no one knows how they did it.
Right.
There's
no one knows
paint,
how they made it.
There's no paint. There's no
Yeah.
dye. So, dude, all this week, all watching documentary after podcast, mind blowing.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Mind blowing.
If it turns out that they can't figure out how anyone could ever do it, like if no one has come up with a theory of how to do that today,
Yeah.
that's where it gets really interesting.
There's this
because it wasn't paint and it wasn't dye and
They all agree on that.
Wasn't burned.
They all
in.
agree it's a mystery.
The image shows both the front and back of the body, consistent with how a burial cloth would have been wrapped around a corpse. The anatomical precision, including bone structure and facial symmetry, had led some researchers to compare the image to a three-dimensional imprint rather than a flat picture. For some skeptics, the resurrection of Jesus has always been the most difficult claim to accept. While they may acknowledge Jesus' historical existence and the crucifixion, the idea of resurrection stretches the limits of their unbelieving brains. Yet for others, the shroud presents a challenge to that skepticism, not as definitive proof, but as an unresolved anomaly that refuses to be dismissed. Believers argue that if no one today can reproduce the image, even with modern technology, then the explanation must extend beyond the natural process. But of course, skeptics respond that mystery alone does not equal miracle. The debate continues, balanced between faith and science. Supporters often draw connections between the shroud and biblical descriptions of Jesus as the light of the world. They suggest that the image was formed by a supernatural burst of light consistent with the scriptural accounts of divine glory. They cite passages describing Jesus transfigured before his disciples, his face shining like the sun and his clothes becoming radiant with light. And scripture also speaks of God as dwelling in unapproachable light, a light no human can fully comprehend. According to believers, the shroud represents a moment when that divine light intersected with human history. They conclude that same light associated with the resurrection is available today through faith in Jesus Christ, through his death, burial, and resurrection. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. You can help support this channel by liking and sharing the videos, or for some extra perks and rewards, consider becoming a channel member. All the links for that are in the video's description, along with links to our Discord server. Please go ahead and join that. You guys know I always look forward to reading your comments, and I do try my best to respond to them all. Don't forget, please, to subscribe and turn on all notifications so you never miss a live event or a new upload. Thanks again, and God bless.